Hello, County Citizens. Today I'm with Dr. Stewart. Thank you for being with me.
My pleasure.
So tell me how the beginning of your story started investigating the books that were in your public library.
Yes, for a number of years, I kind of followed closely the developments of library books to ensure we are regular users of the public library. We are lovers of the public library and of books. My kids go there on a weekly basis. I have kept close tabs on the debate around the country regarding books. And for a number of years, I was quite happy that when I spot checked our library's holdings for some of the most controversial titles, they weren't there. With the most recent nationwide coverage of the developments in Front Royal, Virginia, that sort of clicked in my mind that it was time to recheck. And when I did so, I was disturbed to find not only the leading offender, but then I then did more research and used the most challenged book lists from the American Library Association, PEN America, and the list developed by the parents' organizations in Front Royal, Virginia, to see what other books there might be in the library here in Taylor, Texas, and found 18 pornographic books in the library. Of those 18, most disturbingly, 16 of them are shelved in the children's section of the library.
Wow. So what was your move after you discovered that those were in the library?
Well, there is a process already in place here for challenging works, for requesting that works that are in the library be reconsidered. And so I began that process and began to rally other parents and concerned citizens to do so as well. And so in the intervening weeks, we gathered people together, showed them what was in the book. I gathered excerpts and images so that people weren't simply taking my word for it, so that they could make their own judgment about whether they thought this material was appropriate. Of course, uniformly, almost everyone I talked to was shocked by what they saw and happy to sign a form. And so at the beginning of August, we turned in over 500 forms requesting reconsideration of materials in the library. Now, look, in New York City, 500 would not be a lot, but our town has fewer than 20,000 people. So when you have 500 forms submitted, that's a big voice.
I was just at the Taylor Library in Texas. But my next question for you is a question that's coming up a lot is what's the difference between a public library and a school library and aiming to get these books out of both?
Sure. So, of course, all the materials in a school library are aimed at children, people who are underage. And so there are, of course, materials which would be appropriate for adults to read. Even high literature, which has adult level content. There are books I work for a university, and there are books that my colleagues own. I have a colleague who owns a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf. I would not want an 8-year-old reading Hitler's Mein Kampf, but there are legitimate reasons for a scholar to hold that book, right? If they teach a class on propaganda, it's an extremely useful text, right? Because it was incredibly influential for a period of the 20th century. So there are books that are perfectly legitimate for adults to read, to use, that we would not want kids exposed to. So it's understandable that the restrictions would be greater in a school library. But of course, that doesn't mean there should be no restrictions in a public library, even granting that there will be books that it's appropriate for adults to use, that it's still not appropriate for kids to use. It's not appropriate for there to be sexually explicit, prurient sexually explicit material, pornographic material in the public library at all. If that's something an adult wants, the internet is there for them. We do not need to be spending limited taxpayer dollars on that.
All right, explain to me that this recent library meeting with these 500 requests for reconsideration for the books, what happened at that meeting?
So we filled out all the requests. The library board wanted to break the question into two parts. One, the first book that requests came in for was the book called Genderqueer. This is the most notorious, most reconsidered book in America as people discover what's in it. And so this meeting was limited to that book. And then the other 17 books, 15 of which are in the children's section, will be considered at the next meeting. At this meeting, there were a number of speakers, including myself, who spoke on why we thought that book should be pulled from the library entirely, why it was a mistake to buy it. And I want to clarify, we were also keen to say we don't blame the librarian herself. We know that if you're buying any significant volume of books, it's impossible for the librarian to read each and every one. So they all have policies for procedures for how they acquire books, and they generally trust their professional associations and award lists. In the past, that was a legitimate thing to do. It's now not prudent because those organizations are controlled by people whose views and values are antithetical to families. And it's just that straightforwardly true. So at this meeting, there was a lot of controversy. It lasted a couple of hours. There were times when things got heated. But the end result of it is that the library board recommended unanimously that the book be moved out of the children's section and into the adult section. And while that's not a perfect victory, ideally, that book would be removed entirely. It does not have a legitimate place in the library. Still, that move that the library board is recommending will make the library safer for children.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So is that what you're finding, is that majority of these books are in the young adult section where kids still have access?
Yes, absolutely. So the way our library works is, the way it structurally works is the young adult section is within the children's area. And there is no divider between the shelves where you would find Clifford the Big Red Dog and the shelves where you would find genderqueer. So
for this process specifically, this entire meeting was based on a decision for one book. Will that same process go for the next 17 books that are challenged?
That's exactly the right question. My hope is, and this was brought up a couple times at the meeting, that whatever decision the library board arrived at would become a kind of precedent. My hope is that is in fact the case. That for the other 15 books, it might be a lot shorter meeting because they might just say, we've seen the excerpts from these other books. They fall into the same category of books that are not appropriate for children. They have sexually explicit material in them. And so we'll just apply the standard that we developed in the previous meeting to these books and be consistent with that and vote to recommend moving them all to the adult section.
Mm-hmm. How can citizens and people help the efforts to get these books removed?
Yeah, so at least here in Taylor, contact Strong Families of Taylor. That group, of which I am a member, hosted the form signing party that resulted in over 500 requests for reconsideration on these books being submitted to the librarian. So contact us directly. We're online, website, Facebook.
All right. Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.